It's the Tyler's Place Podcast, a podcast by brothers for brothers, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction. Now, from the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., here's your host, Maynard Edwards, 32nd Degree.
I'm Maynard Edwards. Welcome to the Tyler's Place. And as you can already tell, I'm not in my normal comfy Tyler's Place studio. I'm in a very... I think this is the lowest point of the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. This is the dungeon. That's all there is to it. I don't, maybe I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but there is a dungeon here, and I'm in it because I thought it'd be kind of fun to find a creepy spot in the building to do a little recording. But I couldn't get anybody to come down here with me, so a little bit creeped out. What the heck was that? Anyway, let's get the show going. We've got a great sort of Halloween fun-themed show for you this month, and I hope you enjoy it. Also got a lot of great information about VMAP and about an upcoming event at the House of the Temple. First, let's get the important things out of the way. Email address is podcast@scottishrite.org. You can send me an email anytime, and yes, I get every last one of them, so please keep them coming. Love to hear from you guys. Also, don't forget to download SR Chirp for your smartphone. It is a smartphone messaging app that lets you connect with brothers all over the Southern Jurisdiction. And while you're downloading apps, you can download the Tyler's Place app, listen to each and every podcast in one handy spot. And you can also download the SR Journal app, which allows you to read the Scottish Rite Journal on your smartphone, on your tablet, no matter where you are. So if you're hanging out at the MVA or you find yourself in a dungeon, you can still catch up on everything that's happening in the Scottish Rite. Our first story this month starts in 1888. I'm talking about the Whitechapel murders, a.k.a. the Jack the Ripper case. Of course, any high-profile crime that goes unsolved, somehow or another, Freemasons get lumped into it. We're all used to that by now. However, I have a buddy. His name's Ed Norris. He's a former Baltimore City Police Commissioner, former New York City Police Detective, former Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Police Department. He's currently a talk show host. He actually led a team of investigators for the Discovery Channel to shoot a special called Jack the Ripper in America. And I got him to give me the definitive answer as to whether or not there was a Masonic connection to Jack the Ripper. So I asked him to start by telling us a little bit about the case itself.
A lot of people are familiar with the name Jack the Ripper, but basically there was a series of prostitutes murdered in the Whitechapel area of London around 1881, and they were done in a very unusual fashion where, they were eviscerated, organs were thrown about the room. They were, it looks like they spent a lot of time with the bodies and did a lot of awful things to them, and they were exceptionally brutal killings, and they just suddenly stopped, and they have never been solved. There's been, all kinds of crazy suspects, friends of the royal family, members of the royal family. Oscar Wilde had a connection somehow. People throw all kinds of famous people at the time, celebrities at that, the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, a whole bunch of suspects, and yet they remain unsolved until our show.
So before we dig into that, one of the things that people allege, and if you do a search of Jack the Ripper and Freemasonry, it comes up pretty quickly that the Ripper was probably a Mason, the royal family were Masons, they helped cover things like this up. And one of the things that points to this, the hard evidence that gets pointed to, is some graffiti that was found near one of the murders referring to 3 Jews, and it was spelled strangely. It was spelled with a J-U. Now, there are 3 men in Masonic ritual, Jubilah, Jubilo, and Jubilum, who, they say that their names are spelled with a J-U. So this is pointed to by a bunch of different authors, and even the movie From Hell points to this as evidence that Jack the Ripper was somehow tied to Freemasonry. What was your experience with that graffiti and with that particular clue?
Actually, none. There was. I'm aware of it. I read about it, but it never came into play in the case we investigated. And so people know this was not a work of fiction on our part. This was a legitimate investigation, but this never came up, and it was never even a red herring in our case where we were looking for somebody who was a Freemason. So it just was never part of the case. And I thought our case was pretty strong, although circumstantial, obviously.
As an investigator, are you comfortable saying Jack the Ripper was not a Freemason, or that, are you comfortable enough naming a suspect that we could then investigate as not being a Mason?
Yeah, I mean, I say this, half joking, but I'm not really. I believe the guy we have identified as James Kelly is a really strong suspect, and he's the guy I believe would be the if I were going to investigate and prosecute this case and try it in a court now, obviously he's long dead, but he'd be the guy, and there was no indication he was ever a Mason. So I can say, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, there was no Freemasonry involved because I think he's our guy. James Kelly was he killed his wife in a way that was somewhat similar to some of the. He had stabbed her in the throat and cut her throat and murdered her in their own home. He was sentenced to death, but he avoided the gallows because he was deemed to be psychologically unfit. So they put him into Broadmoor, which was a mental hospital at the time. That's where they thought he belonged because he was not fit to stand trial. Several years later, he fashions a key out of a piece of lead somehow and escapes from the mental hospital. He was a suspect at the time. I got to read the whole Jack the Ripper investigation. Basically, I have to start at the end to get to the beginning. He escapes from Broadmoor. The murders take place. They stop at some point, and there is no suspect arrested. James Kelly appears at Broadmoor in 1927 as an old man. He shows up there and says, I want to come home, and basically writes out, they ask him where you've been. He writes out this long manifesto about he went to the United States on the warpath in America, and we overlay all the cities that he claimed he had lived in and worked in while he was in the U.S. and ran the newspaper articles at the time, and there were similar killings to Jack the Ripper, and the media was questioning at the time, had Jack the Ripper come to America? So we did that because of his recount of his years. He spent 42 years there, I think he said. So with that knowledge, and we were the first people to get it because of mental hygiene laws, they weren't allowed to release this letter for a certain amount of years. So we were the first people to get this letter, and that's how I got to be contacted to investigate it. And then we did a series of, basic investigative steps. I went to read the original case folder, and as any modern case folder, there were mistakes made, and not even intentional, just like when a detective got transferred, somebody retires, a case is passed to someone else, the work is somewhat, some guys did great jobs, some guys did subpar, so there was some mistakes made. He was a suspect originally. They visited his home, but of course it was her parents' house, so he's not going to return to the scene of the murder and live with her parents, so that was silly, and they never continued to pursue him. So we did a lot of other things, like actually verified his account that he hopped aboard. So I went to the Greenwich Maritime Museum, pulled out the logs at the time and found that ship that actually did leave for New York from Europe at the time, he said. He claimed he did that, went back and forth several times, and we verified the shipping records. Then there was a description of him. There was a suspect description at the time, so we had a police sketch artist to actually draw the sketch from the description that the witness gave. We had someone actually, how they age children on milk cartons to say, John Doe is missing since he's 8 years old. He would look like this now at 20. We got someone who does that to de-age the photo of him taken in 1927 as an old man. So the photo he got taken at Broadmoor when he surrendered, we had someone de-age to about the time of the suspect. The resemblance was striking. It really, really looked very similar. So it's pretty fascinating. We also did handwriting analysis. I visited all the crime scenes, compared them to the crime scenes in New York, visited those crime scenes where things took place. So I just feel all in all that James Kelly was a really, really solid suspect, and they may have whiffed on this by not following up way back.
So got a suspect, and he's not a Mason, so I guess we're off the hook then.
As far as I'm concerned, you are, yeah.
Excellent news. That's my friend Ed Norris, former New York City police detective and Baltimore City Police Commissioner. No Masonic connection to Jack the Ripper. The final answer is in. You can find Ed online. He's a talk show host in Baltimore, but he also has a podcast you can find on iTunes called Hard Truth with Ed Norris. Give it a listen. Coming up, we get into the VMAP Minute with Brother Jeff Maynard.
If you're interested in becoming a Freemason or in joining the Scottish Rite, email us at podcast@scottishrite.org.
The Valley Membership Achievement Project, better known as VMAP, is intended to help each Valley fulfill its commitment to our members by providing the very best experience possible. It's a grassroots effort, and we want you involved to help shape VMAP as it goes along. Joining us each month on the Tyler's Place podcast is VMAP Committee Chairman Jeff Maynard. He's down in the Valley of Baton Rouge, which, as many of you know, was hit pretty hard a couple of weeks ago by some flooding and the rebuild. Jeff, how are things going?
Yeah, people are starting to be able to get permits and put their houses back together. We're still going to need some help and some prayers and some time, but the community's definitely on the upswing in men.
All right, let's talk VMAP, the case at hand. I understand we've got a little bit of breaking news about VMAP.
So one of the common comments we heard at the workshops this year was, man, I really want an electronically fillable workbook. How do I get an electronically fillable workbook? Well, we have heard your cries, and thanks to Elizabeth McCarthy's hard work, we have created an electronically fillable PDF version of the workbook. So you can go in to the Scottish Rite webpage, scottishrite.org/VMAP. It's right there, 2016 workbook. You click on that, And there are now two options. There's the old workbook, that's the static one. If you don't want to fill it out electronically, if you want to print it out and fill it in by hand, you can still certainly do that. But there's also now one labeled fillable. And if you open that up in Adobe Reader, you will be able to fill in a bunch of fields. Just type all of your answers and all of your information right in there. Save it, email it in. It's got electronic signature capability, so you can get it all signed electronically. You don't have to print anything out. You don't have to worry about the paper. I think it's a fantastic advance for us because those fields are automatically expandable.
I know it's Feast of Tishri season, and that's a big VMAP checkbox, isn't it?
It is. The Feast of Tishri is one of the statutory feasts. It's the feast of the Lodge of Perfection. The Feast of Tishri is actually, based on a date in the Hebrew calendar, so the Jewish calendar, so it moves around a little bit. Sometimes it falls in late September, sometimes it falls in early October. So anywhere in there works for observances. But the Feast of Tishri really is this great opportunity towards the end of your year to get your members together, to give thanks for the things that Scottish Rite Masonry has brought to your life. You can open it up to non-Scottish Rite Masons. Maybe you want to invite local Master Masons to come and join you for this feast and educational topic. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but I really encourage every Valley out there, have something for the Feast of Tishri.
You heard it from the man himself. Great ideas. Feast of Tishri. It's a chance to do it up, get a little VMAP credit. If you've got a question about VMAP or something you want to offer, send us a message. VMAP, that's VMAP, at scottishrite.org. Somebody will answer your question, and we might even feature it here on the Tyler's Place podcast. Coming up, we talk Masonic ghost stories here in the House of the Temple. As you know, I'm broadcasting from the dungeon inside the House of the Temple, and I couldn't get him to come down here, but my buddy Josh, who works upstairs, is the museum curator, and he's got a few House of the Temple ghost stories himself, so I'll see if I can't give him a ring.
Got a question about VMAP? Send them to vmap@scottishrite.org. All questions get answered, and your question may even appear on the next Tyler's Place podcast.
My good friend and brother Josh Poole, he's the museum curator here at the House of the Temple and archival associate. And Josh, I have a distinct recollection of running into you at one point in time where you had Albert Pike's death mask in your hand.
That is correct. That was the first time I believe that you and I met, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought that was the first time we met. Well, is there something in the collection, because we've talked about the death mask in the past, is there something in the collection that is just as creepy?
We do have something creepy, creepy-ish. It was actually a gift given to Ronnie Steele, the Grand Commander, back in during the biennial session last year. It was from one of the members from the Supreme Council from the Ivory Coast, and it is a totem of a man with a double-headed mask that has the head of a warthog, or the tusk of a warthog, the head of a hyena, the teeth of an alligator, with two chameleons on the top, and it's wearing this sack loin cloth. And the first time I saw it, I was terrified of it. I did not want it in my office. It kind of creeps me out because it's just one of those things that, if you saw in the middle of the night, it would freak you out. But once I did some research on it, I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called. But there is a tradition in African tribes that this was a costume that people from this particular tribe would put on when someone passed away. And the belief was that by wearing this outfit and having this sort of liquid where the chameleons are holding a little bowl that they would put liquid in, they believed that it would give them this magical power to scare away evil spirits from this evil spirits taking the person's soul away. And it was believed that by wearing this and having the liquid, the magical powers, it was that because it's double-headed, the person could see both, in all directions, and it could spit out fire and a swarm of bees from its mouth.
Now, that's a pretty handy superpower to have.
Well, yeah, it is, because it stays in my office now to help protect me from any ghost of the temple.
Well, let's talk about some of the temple haunts. As the museum curator, you're in some of these darker corners of the building sometimes, and by yourself. Do you have any Masonic ghost stories you might want to lay on us?
I do. Being the museum curator, and I'm also over the internship, so there's a lot of times that I have to open up the building for tours that are on the weekends or during our hours when we're closed. And there was one time where I opened up, and I was by myself. It was, I believe, I don't remember what day it was, but I had to wait for the tour group to come in, and I was by myself just sitting there in the atrium. And all of a sudden, I hear what sounded like footsteps leaving the executive chamber and walking in the rotunda back towards the Pillars of Charity. And then they stopped. I was like, I have to be by myself. There's no one else in the building. Of course, I call my mother, and I'm like, Mom, I just heard footsteps in this building. I know I'm by myself, but yet I'm going to go check it out. And I walked, and I did not see anything. But even then, it was just the creep factor of you hearing these sounds and not really know what's making it.
This building is a beautiful, beautiful treasure, no doubt about it. But when those shadows get kind of long and the footsteps echo, it is definitely creepy.
I don't like being alone in the building, and I've gotten to where if I am alone in the building and I have to close it, I sing as loud as I can because it echoes, and it makes me feel like there's more people in there.
I could probably guess what you're singing.
Frank Sinatra, show tunes.
Gotcha.
It depends on my mood.
That's what I thought. So anybody, if you're wandering by the house of the temple late at night and you hear Sinatra being belted from within, don't panic. It's just Josh hanging in there by himself.
Exactly, which they're more than welcome if they want to come keep me company while I close up the building. That's fine.
Josh Poole, he's the museum curator and the archival associate inside the House of the Temple. Coming up, a great event at the House of the Temple, Masonic Munzee Masters. What's Munzee and how does it relate to us? Going to give you the details in just a sec.
This is The Tyler's Place with your host, Maynard Edwards.
Sue Kelly joins me by phone, and she is the coordinator for an event called Masonic Munzee Masters. This is a really interesting thing, and Sue, let's start at the beginning. The event is November 5th at the House of the Temple, but let's start by asking, what exactly is Munzee?
I guess to sum it up is, Munzee is more like a scavenger hunt, similar like geocaching. There's other types of geolocation scavenger type games out there that a lot of folks play. Munzee is a relatively new. They actually started back in 2011 in Texas, here in the United States, and they've developed using the QR codes as a scavenger hunt game. And the actual Munzees are placed or deployed by people who play the game in your community. And you use your smartphone. You would download the app on your smartphone through your Play Store, and it's available in all formats for the different variety of smartphones that are out there on the market. You just go to your app store and download the free app for Munzee.
Some players then hide the Munzees, and others go and find them, and some do both, I guess.
Yes. Once you download the app to your smartphone, and you create your free account, you can create your free account if you want to in advance from your desktop computer, and you would pick a username, a player name, and user ID. Once you create your free account, you would enter in your player name that you select along with your password. Once you install the app on your phone, you would enter in that information, and a map will come up of your surrounding area where you're at that present time. And you'll get to see on the map screen little pin icons of all of the Munzees in your surrounding area. And the different types of Munzees have different colored icons, so the player can easily identify whether it's a physical or a virtual.
How does Munzee tie into the Scottish Rite?
The Scottish Rite, I've actually have worked with them since 2008, when we developed the Masonic Geocaching Society. The Scottish Rite, and I've worked with Dean Alban, they've done an excellent job of trying to look at new technology, cutting ways in order to engage its members in fun family activities, both through geocaching and now Munzee. It's a great way for families and for members to get together, to get outside, to explore your communities, to explore areas that you may vacation, and that you can engage everyone in, because Munzee, just like geocaching, offers a little something for everyone. And the Scottish Rite has done a really good job of trying to look for new ways to engage its member in fun activities.
This sounds like it's a lot of fun. Tell us about the event happening. I know it's November 5th.
The Scottish Rite will be hosting a fun family event in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, November 5th, beginning at 9 a.m. at the House of the Temple. The event will have both a geocaching event and a Munzee event, along with an evency. And an evency is a sister company to Munzee. And I'll explain that a little bit, but at the event itself, we'll not only offer tours of the House of the Temple, we're also going to have hands-on demonstrations. We're going to have a vendor booth from the Space Coast Geo Store and Munzee Marketplace. Will have a booth available at the House of the Temple. We will have a seminar session. The event, we're also going to feature and have a little fun add-on game, and it's called EventZee, EVENTZEE. And this is like a sister company to Munzee. That is also an app that you would need to download to your smartphone. And what EventZee is, it's a photo scavenger hunt. And myself, along with Dean Alban, we're going to create a fun scavenger hunt for Saturday, November 5th, and it'll run for 24 hours, where we're going to, when you install the app and you click on to join the event, the day at the temple on the 5th, a list of clues will come up. You follow those clues to a certain location and take photos. And it's going to be a photo scavenger hunt where we're going to lead you to some really interesting, fun locations around the city, while after the event, if you're out geocaching or Munzeeing, you'll also be able to participate in the EventZee. And we'll have some fun things to go along with that as well.
This is a great family event and a great chance for non-Scottish Rite Masons to come to the House of the Temple and have a little fun and enjoy our beautiful building and enjoy some of our fraternity. Reach out to the community a little bit. This would be something, some of you guys could do this in your own valleys. I think that'd be pretty cool as well. So make sure you bring some folks along with you. Sue, thank you so much for joining me. Coming up, it's Tyler's Trivia.
Tyler's Trivia with your Grand Archivist, Arturo de Hoyos.
Your friendly neighborhood Maynard here in the dungeon in the House of the Temple. Yes, it's creepy, and so creepy, in fact, that I have not been able to get any of the other employees at the House of the Temple to come down here with me. Sean Grayston, he's like the guy who's in charge of the building. He's been on the show a bunch of times. He wouldn't come down here to record, says it's too creepy even for him. And he builds the place. And I called Art de Hoyos and I said, hey, I'm going to be doing the taping for Tyler's place in the dungeon. And he said, yeah, have fun with that. And I said, are you going to come down? And he just seriously flat, no, nobody else will come down here. So I'm flying solo for Tyler's Trivia, as it were. And let's recap last month's question. Last month's question actually came to us from Brother Micah Evans, who gave us the question, in what year did the Supreme Council hold their biennial session meeting in the Valley of Omaha? And the answer was 1926. Did not have a winner on that one this month. That was a little trickier than we thought. Micah actually had pitched in a little extra prize. He was going to include a book along with the autographed copy of one of Art's books that we always send out. He was going to include a history of the Valley of Omaha in with the regular prize, but we did not have a winner. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to roll that prize over. So we'll get that book into the next winner for this month's question. And I'm sort of left to my own devices, and I want to stick with my Halloween theme here. The House of the Temple, as you may know, inside there are interred 2 bodies. So, whose bodies are interred in the house of the temple. Now, they're not buried, obviously. They're in the walls. So that's not burial, that's internment. So make sure I get the terminology correct. I know some of you guys are sticklers. So who is interred here at the house of the temple? I know it's an easy putt, but it's a fun Halloween trivia question. If you know the answer, send me an email to podcast@scottishrite.org. And you can also reach out on SR Chirp, send me a brother-to-brother message there, and I will pick 2 winners, one from each place, from all the correct answers we receive. And we should have a bunch of them because, again, this one is a little bit of an easy putt. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Tyler's Place podcast. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, you can send me an email, podcast@scottishrite.org. Pictures, love to get those. Love to know when and where you listen to the show. So please include all of that information. And if you've got an idea, always love to hear those. We'll catch you next time right here on the Tyler's Place.
For questions, comments, or if you have an idea for the Tyler's Place, email us. If you're interested in becoming a Freemason or in joining the Scottish Rite, email us at podcast@scottishrite.org.